welcome to Unit 2, Day 2 in Algebra 1. We are discussing writing and graphing linear equations today. A lot of this may seem familiar to last year, but some of it will be new today. Okay, a linear equation is just an equation that creates a graph that is a line. Linear equation is an equation that when graphed, the graph is a line. And the other thing special about linear equations is they have a constant rate of change. Constant rate of change is what we normally call the slope. As we talked about on day 1, slope and rate of change use the same formula. So being that it's a constant rate of change, it goes rise over run, the same from each point on the graph. So in this formula, slope-intercept form, we reviewed that a little bit probably last week. We have y equals mx plus b. Reminders, what the m equals is called your slope, and the b is called your y-intercept. So today we're just going to review several of the things that we did last week, but not all of us probably mastered that, so we're going to spend an entire day today just looking at different ways to write an equation and different ways to graph. So right now, what you see here is called standard form. Standard form looks like when you have a number with x plus a number with b equals another number. So, meaning these three things are just numbers. So if you ever see like x plus y equals a number, that's just called standard form. Okay, we want to take something from standard form and switch it to slope-intercept form. We practiced this last chapter and earlier and before we started this chapter. So slope-intercept form is solving for y. It says then identify the slope and y-intercept. So let's look at the first one. Your goal is to get it to look like this. We want the y by itself. So first step is to move the x. I would say move the x to the other side. So if it's 4x here, I'm going to subtract 4x to the other side. Bring down the 2y equals. Remember, if you look at slope-intercept form, this x part comes first, then plus the other number. So this one would be negative 4x, and you can put plus negative 10, or you can just write minus 10. The second step is to get rid of the number in front of the y. So step 2 is going to be divide by the number with the y. So here we have a 2 in front of our y, so we're going to divide each of these by a 2. Okay, and what we have left is y equals negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 in x. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Out of those, the slope is the number with the x, so I'll say negative 2 is the slope. The y-intercept would be negative 5. Remember, when you're writing the number for slope, it's just a number. It's not the actual x, it's the coefficient, or the number by the x. So the number by the x was negative 2, not the x itself. Alright, pause the video, try the second one. See if you can get y by itself. So our step 1 says move the x. So we're going to subtract the 3x to the other side. What I'm bringing down is negative y equals, write your x value first, negative 3x plus 2. And then you said step 2, divide by the number with y. Well, in this case, the only thing you see by the y is that negative sign. So that represents a negative 1. So we're going to divide everything by negative 1. When you do that, you get y equals negative divided by negative makes positive 3x. And 2 divided by negative 1 makes a negative 2. If you ever get a number here like 3 divided by 1, or over here 4 divided by 2, those both worked out nicely. If you ever have a number like 3 divided by 2, it's going to be a fraction. It's okay to leave it a fraction. Your slope, most likely, well, oftentimes, it's going to be a fraction and not a whole number, just so you know. Alright, so that was our y-intercept, that was our slope, so I put those on the blank. Okay, now take your answers from number 1, and we're going to graph. So the answer we had on number 1 was y equals, we'll just copy it down from up here, y equals negative 2x minus 5. We've already identified the slope, we've identified the y-intercept, so the way you graph something is you start at the y-intercept. So in this case, we said the y-intercept for this one was negative 5. This is called your y-axis. This is your x-axis. So negative 5 would be down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put a point. Once you have the y-intercept graph, the second step to graphing is to count the slope from that point. Okay, so our slope for this one was negative 2. Okay. If you don't have a fraction, the way you make a whole number a fraction is you put it over 1. So in this case, rise over run tells me we would go down 2 and then right 1. If it's a positive number, we would go up first. So it's either down and to the right or up and to the right, unless for some reason it doesn't fit on our graph. So down 1, 2, over 1. On this one, if I go down 2 and over 1, my next point would be off the graph. So this might be a case, maybe you want to do the opposite. If you wanted to find more points, you could go up 2 and back 1. Because if you think about it, I'm going to write this over here so it doesn't confuse you. Negative 2 over 1 is the same as 2 over negative 1. Because if you reduce either one of those, that's the same as negative 2. This is the same as negative 2. So whether you make the top number negative or the bottom number negative, it has the same slope. So that's why you can do the opposite of this. Instead of going down 2 and right 1, you could go up 2 and left 1. It continues that same pattern so we can see where the line would be. So start at your y-intercept, then count your slope from that point. So from the y-intercept, I went down 2 over 1. Let's try the next one. Looking back up here, it says we're graphing our example 1. So our answer here was y equals 3x minus 2. So I'll write that here, y equals 3x minus 2, and we're going to graph that. You start at the y-intercept. We said the y-intercept was negative 2. So we'll go down to 2, 1, 2. This time we have a slope of 3. So I'm going to do 3 over 1 to make it a fraction. So you're going to go up 3 and right 1. So from that point we count 1, 2, 3 over 1. 1, 2, 3 over 1. And you could just continue that pattern so these dots are going to start to make a straight line for you. Since we're graphing linear equations and a linear equation is a line, you want to make sure you're drawing your line when you're done graphing your points. Alright, this time, instead of giving you an equation, I'm going to give you a graph and I want you to write the equation. Okay, so the first one, we need to identify where the y-intercept is and what the slope would be. So for this one, the y-intercept is considered right here. It's a little dark here, but that would be 1, 2, 3. We'd have a y-intercept of 3. And then you count your slope. This one's going down 1, right 2. Down 1, right 2. So how you write that, if it's going down, that's considered negative 1. over 2. So that would be our slope and our y-intercept. And the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So you have to remember that the m is your slope, so that would be negative 1/2 x plus 3. Because on that graph it had a y-intercept of 3 and it had a slope of negative 1 over 2. So down 1 over 2. Let's look at the next one. The y-intercept for this picture is right here. So this y-intercept is at negative 2. And this one doesn't go up at all, it just goes over. So this is a flat line. We say it has a slope of 0. So you can do this one a couple different ways. You can either write y equals 0x minus 2, because there's 0 for your slope. Or, since there's 0 slope or 0x, you can just write y equals negative 2. So if you ever see a flat horizontal line, they just leave off the x because there's no x. You'll notice this line never crosses the x-axis. That's why there's 0x there. Okay, so it's a flat line. This one has no y-intercept. So instead of not having a y value, this one doesn't have, or instead of not having an x value, it doesn't have a y value. So this one's a little bit different. This one has no y-intercept, and it's a vertical line, so the slope is called undefined. So that doesn't follow any of our rules for slope-intercept form. So how do we write an equation that has no slope and no y-intercept? The only thing we do know is it has an x value. So, to write the equation for a vertical line, you write x equals whatever number that is at. So this line is on the point x equals 2. So the equation for this line is x equals 2. So if you ever have a vertical line, it doesn't really follow the slope-intercept form, but you can still write an equation. It's just an x equals, because it only has an x value. It doesn't have a y value. Alright, today this part will probably be new for most all of you. So, slope-intercept form we can do from a graph, we can do from standard form, which I already wrote standard form on the other side, but point-slope form is something used when you have the word point and you have a slope. See, point and a slope. So the slope we know is the letter m. Okay. What will be new, you see it has 2 y's and 2 x's in this problem, and sometimes that confuses people. So your point is considered your x1 and your y1. x1, comma, y1. We use things like that when we did like the slope formula, but so in this problem, this number and this number behind those minus signs represent the point. Okay? Use when you're given 2 points to start a problem. So write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line containing the following points. So this time, instead of giving you the y-intercept or giving you the slope, you're going to have to use this formula. So to start with, we have points, but we don't have a slope. So step 1 is to find the slope. To review slope from our day 1, this is your x1, your y1. This is your x2 and y2. We're going to plug that into this slope formula. So 2 minus 4 over 3 minus negative 1. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Anytime you have minus and negative, I'm going to change that to plus. So I get 4, and always reduce if you can, so that would be negative 1/2. This is our slope. Okay. So down here in the formula, look back up at your first point. Your y1 was 4. We found your slope to be negative 1/2. And we found the x1 up there says negative 1. So I just put blanks to help you realize, okay, here's your formula. These are the 3 spots you're going to be putting numbers. You put it in for the slope, and you put it in for the x1 and y1. So I'm going to write the problem how it would look down here. Y minus 4 equals negative 1/2 x minus a negative. I like to just write that as a positive, because we call it cross the line, change the sign. When you have minus a negative, you can cross the line and change the sign. Okay, to simplify, you're going to distribute negative 1/2 times x, negative 1/2 times 1. Your goal in simplifying is to get it to slope-intercept form. So, solve for y to get in slope-intercept form. Room there, so let's write, abbreviate. So when it says simplify, we're trying to get it to slope-intercept form because the directions just say write an equation in slope-intercept form. Well, that's what we're trying to do. So we'll distribute here. So you get negative 1/2 x minus 1/2, because 1 times negative 1/2 is negative 1/2. Then the step to get y by itself, you would add 4 to the other side, and you want to add 4 to the one that doesn't have an x, because 4 doesn't have an x. So negative 1/2 plus 4 gives me positive 3.5. So that, given these 2 points would be on this line if we graphed that line. Alright. Why don't you pause the video, try this one on your own, and see if you understand how to find slope. Can you plug it in point-slope form? And can you simplify it to get y by itself, so it looks like slope-intercept? So go ahead and pause the video to try that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now with x1 and y1 as my first point, x2 and y2 as my second point. Step 1 says find slope. So you subtract 11 minus 9 over 3 minus 6. 11 minus 9 is 2. 3 minus 6 is negative 3. So this is considered my slope. Now we're going to plug it into this formula. It's called slope-intercept form. Sorry, point-slope form. And that's called point slope. Okay, so we can go up to our original problem. The y1 here is 9, so I will take y minus 9. M stands for the slope, which we found was negative 2/3. And then x minus your x1 here is 6. Okay, so now we're going to distribute. To simplify, we're on step 3 now. Okay, so for me, if I'm doing this in my head without a calculator, I would take negative 2 times negative 6 is 12. And then this line means divide by 3. So if you do 12 when you multiply, divided by 3, 12 divided by 3 is 4. I'll put plus 4. Because that negative times the negative made positive 12. Divided by 3 was where the 4 came from. The last step to get y by itself would be to add the 9 to the other side. Again, add it to the one that doesn't have the x, because the 9 doesn't have an x. So that is the line that these 2 points would make up. If you graph those 2 points, it would make that line.